Good evening and welcome to Legal Aid Explained. I'm Adam Salzman, your host. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Chicago Legal Clinic, and I am very pleased to welcome for our first episode ever, Ina Winston, who has the distinction of being our first guest. Ina is the supervising attorney at the clinic's immigration program, and today we're going to talk about issues in U.S. immigration law, and we're going to talk about how that's impacting your practice and how it impacts your clients. So welcome, Ina.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
It's nice to be able to talk like this. We don't get to do it in the office. We have to do it on television.
Right.
So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about you, because one of the reasons we decided at the clinic to launch this program was not just to reach out to folks who might be in need of legal services, but educate people also about what public interest attorneys do and how they come to this career path, because it's a unique career path for people who go to law school and seek to obtain a law degree and a license to practice law. Oftentimes, folks will chase after the money, for lack of a better term. But it's a very special kind of individual who views the profession as a calling to help those who would not otherwise be able to help themselves. And you're a wonderful exemplar of that. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how your career got started, where you went to law school and where you first set up practice.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I went to the University of Chicago for my undergraduate degree. I really wasn't too sure what I wanted to do when I got out. I kind of knew what I didn't want to do, that I didn't want to go into academia and try for a PhD, because I just felt that it was very crowded and people were very competitive for very small amounts of resources.
Yeah.
So I thought about law. I didn't really know what lawyers did, and every place I went, I got negative responses when I asked people for their advice. And then I just decided that I would go to work, and I went to work at that time with the American Medical Association, and it was a much different organization than it is now. I mean, it's in this century now.
Yeah.
But at that time, it wasn't really. And I was editing a short journal that was supposed to contain cases that were supposed to be of interest to physicians. I have to confess, I actually never met a living physician who read this thing, but it was a great job. So, and then I thought to myself, well, wait, why am I reading about everybody else's cases?
Right.
What is going on here? And then one day I was just so tired of editing these things. I thought, I was writing on the L, and I thought, like, wow, I could throw all these things right out the window and never miss them. What is going on here? Is this what I really want to do? So I applied to law school at DePaul, and at that time DePaul had a night school, which was perfect. And I guess they don't do night school anymore, which I think is kind of unfortunate.
Right.
Because I really liked the people in my class, because they were all working people, so we were not
It's so
at each other's
important to have
throats.
that option for people who work and can't necessarily afford to give up their job in order to attend school full time.
That's right. And everybody had interesting experiences. They were accountants, policemen, firemen, people with lives outside of law school. So I was working at my job. I went to night school, and I really did like it. And then I went to get a job, and it was right before things began to change. And I went and I was interviewed at different law firms. And people asked me if I was on contraceptives and if I had a boyfriend, yada, yada. And let's put it this way. I got so many rejection notices, I could have papered my bedroom with all those notices.
And what year is this, if I might ask?
This is 1971. So it's just before things really changed. So I really didn't know what to do exactly, but then I saw in the newspaper there was an exam, a civil service exam, at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. unknown to me, that was really an auspicious time for a person who had no political backing to apply there. Because
So, if I might interrupt for a second, back up. What is the Metropolitan Water Reclamation
Metropolitan
District?
Water Reclamation District is one of the largest sewage treatment agencies in the country. They are they have a huge budget, and they are an economic engine for Northern Illinois because you have to have sewage and industrial waste treatment in order to develop.
And am I right?
In Illinois,
Right in saying that the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District was back then, as it is now, a totally separate unit of
It
government.
has its own separate statute
Yeah.
completely.
And can levy its own taxes.
That's correct.
And has its own elected representative
That's correct.
body. Right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I applied, I took this exam, I scored really well. This was the time when they had just had the Egan investigation, the Egan blue paper, after there had been a scandal. And
Political corruption in
right,
city and
right.
county
It was in
government.
the alleged corruption in the personnel department. And so they revised the statute so that you couldn't pass over somebody who scored really high more than a certain number of times. Okay, so I get this job, and I'm the first woman in their law department. It would put it. I was definitely not welcomed. I mean, I had a supervisor who told me, don't be signing those letters with your name. Just sign them I, Winston. Nobody's going to respect the letter if you put your name down. And on it went. I mean, it was a madhouse. It was really disturbing. However, I have to say I really liked the work. Because whatever else you could say, there were a lot of, at that time was a period of social change, and there were a lot of environmentally conscious people and interesting people working there, really bright, interesting people.
Early 70s is
Right.
sort of the early
the
days.
EPA,
Yeah.
and we did a lot of industrial waste litigation to help industries come into compliance. And then I branched out. It was at that time, the law department was much smaller than it is now, so I was sort of a generalist. Did a lot of litigation. Nobody wanted these civil rights cases. They thought they were just worthless, stupid cases. But
Right.
actually, they were very interesting class action cases.
Right.
So I did those, and I did a lot of there's always a lot of contract litigation in a big governmental agency which has a lot of construction.
Sure.
And there were a lot of bright people there.
Yeah.
So the work was fun. The environment was dismal for me.
Emblematic of the times.
Of the times.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the times fortunately changed, and I began to finally move up.
Yeah.
And by the time I had been there for 28 years, I was a head assistant attorney, and I was splitting my time between litigation and between doing lobbying for the district in Springfield.
In
Which,
Springfield.
contrary to what people say, they say, oh, lazy people in Springfield. Actually, there's a lot of really bright people in Springfield because government is one of the best employers, and the people at the who draft the bills have a lot of historical knowledge. The staffers there are outstanding.
Right.
I mean, and actually many legislators are very hardworking.
Right.
And it was a little, for me, by that time, I had adopted my child. I had gone to Paraguay and adopted a child. And so it was a little crazy because we had to go down on the train, and I would sit in the bar with my kid talking to a legislator. And so it was a little bit chaotic, but it all worked really well. We got a lot of good legislation passed.
Right.
Things that established this as a regional agency rather than one where you had competing factions. I mean, just there were some tough legislative battles that we had.
And when you talk about the staffers in Springfield and how expert they are, I think that's a lot of institutional knowledge that people don't understand
That's
exists
right.
up there. People don't appreciate the distinction between the elected officials who ostensibly come and go, and some of them stay there for a very long time, and the institutional professional staff that's there on more or less an ongoing basis in a lot of cases.
That's quite true. Well, there were many elected officials, and this was from both sides of the aisle because we were not the city of Chicago. We make that clear. any elected official in Cook County was our audience, and that included Republicans.
Sure.
And you had much more moderate Republicans that we worked with. And
Right.
we sponsored bills like Marty Butler, the late Marty Butler from Park Ridge, sponsored major flood control legislation, because that's a job to get flood control bonds for sewage and waste control.
Right.
That's a
Long-term
job.
infrastructural projects that you cannot pay for,
Right.
ever hope to pay for up front, so you bond for them and
That's
then you pay
exactly
it
right.
off over time. Right.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So I mean, we had successful, challenging lobbying efforts, and I worked with the late Andy Ferengo, who was a great mentor. I'm very lucky to work with him. And I learned a lot. I learned to have respect for the whole legislative process, and many of the people were just extraordinary.
Yeah, and well, and in turn, I'm sure that even by the time you were done at MWRD, you were that much better of an attorney for having been exposed to these battles and having to tailor arguments to both sides
That's
of the
exactly
aisle.
right.
So I've always found that your path and the way you came to immigration law and the clinic to be very interesting, because when I first came to the clinic in 2017, my predecessor pulled me aside and he said, "Ina is really extraordinary. She is the best. She's one of the best attorneys on staff, and would you believe that this is like her second act? That she's kind of sort of retired, and then she's kind of just doing this because she likes to do it." And I always found that to be very remarkable about you, that, at least for a while, technically, you were part-time, but whenever I went to the Pilsen office, you were always there.
Well, it's just such interesting work, and it's so gratifying, and we have great clients, and this is a good environment to work in. You create a really collaborative environment where we can talk to people who have expertise in other areas like criminal law, expungement, family law, all areas that relate and are integral to the immigration practice.
Yeah, well, so let's talk a little bit about how you made this transition, how you got from a very accomplished and longstanding career at MWRD to what you do at the clinic now.
Well, after I retired, after I was there for 28 years, I retired, and they had a great pension plan, thank God. And I thought, well, I'm going to enjoy being a mom, because I had adopted a child from Paraguay. Well, of course, when you adopt somebody from another country, it does make you think about immigration issues and what it's like for somebody to come from a different culture. And so I did enjoy being a mom. And then came middle school, and I thought to myself, okay, I have to do something than make my kid my career.
Really enjoyed being a mom, and then came middle school.
I have to do something
can relate.
besides make my kid my career. I can't.
Right.
I mean, I got to give her a break here.
Right.
And so I was looking for opportunities, and by that time I had taken some immigration classes at DePaul, and with Craig Mooson, and then I met some of the people in the immigration clinic, and so I just put out feelers for jobs that were just low-keyed and part-time, because my child really was younger, and I wanted to, I didn't want to create a really stressful environment because I'm a single mom, and so I was really lucky, and Carolyn Schoenberger asked me if I would come on as a volunteer, so I did.
And so Carolyn Schoenberger, who was a long-standing attorney at the clinic, ran our immigration program for many years.
That's right.
Yeah. And so you came in through Carolyn.
I did, and I must say I learned a lot from Carolyn. I think Carolyn had special expertise in trials, in knowing how to think on her feet and knowing how to craft an argument. And I'm really grateful to have worked under her because of that particular expertise of hers.
Well, she has extraordinary poise and can think and articulate issues very well on the fly, Carolyn.
So I started working in immigration law, and it was a small office in Pilsen, and we loved that little office. And it just gave me a chance to get to know the clients, to really learn their lives, and to really learn the law too, because it wasn't a high pressure environment, so I could actually take the time to really read the law and actually learn what this was about. And I did, and it's very gratifying. It's a great area to practice in, and we have great clients and a great working environment.
We have an outstanding staff. So okay, let's talk about immigration as a practice area over the years in the United States and also in the city of Chicago and Cook County. The year you came to the clinic was 2009, am I correct?
That's correct.
So that's the early period of the Obama presidency. But maybe we shouldn't start there. Maybe we should backtrack to some of the earlier ways immigration has been approached in the United States. And I think, as we were discussing and have discussed before, a lot of what people think is new and frightening is actually something that's been going on in this country to varying degrees for a long time.
That's really true. The United States has an ambivalent attitude towards immigration, and always has. In some ways, we are extraordinarily enlightened. I mean, I don't think you're going to go to too many countries and find VAWA, which is violence against women,
Yeah.
although the beneficiaries may very well be men. There are people who are the victims of domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence in a marriage, and they can file a petition on their own behalf instead of relying on the abuser, instead of having to stay with an abuser. And the goal is to put the survivor of domestic violence in the same position he or she would have been in had the person they married been a normal, helpful person and not an abuser.
Right.
So, I mean, that's pretty enlightened when you think of it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to find that in authoritarian regimes.
No, that's very progressive legislation.
It is.
And then the question comes, how is that legislation applied, and for whose benefit?
Well, it's actually applied, I think, in a very beneficial way.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a lot of success with the VAWA cases. We have a strong section. Zulmira Paredes is one of our attorneys, and she has a special expertise in the intersection between family law and immigration. And she handles a lot of these domestic violence cases now. I used to handle them, and I still do, but she handles a lot of them also. And I think it's a very beneficial law, and I think it has worked for many people to set them on a new life. And there's nothing like seeing a woman get her status and then start a whole new life. Another area which is enlightened is this area of 751s. When a person's been married for less than 2 years, their permanent resident card is conditional. So within 90 days prior to the expiration of the 2 years, they have to show that they're still living in marital union, that it's a bona fide marriage. Because there is a lot of marriage fraud. Okay, this is designed to attack that. But sometimes the marriage is bona fide, but there's a divorce, or the person's been abused, and they cannot file a joint 751 because the other person will not sign it.
Sure.
We get a lot of cases like that. And that's another situation where we can really help people who have been abused, people who are divorced. It was bona fide. The test was what was the party's intention at the inception of the marriage? Was it to make a life together? And if it was, it was, and they have the evidence to show that.
Sure.
So we do a lot of these 751s. I mean, and it's a big relief when that card comes and the conditions are removed, and that person can go out and live their life and ultimately become a citizen.
It's a whole new level of security for them. And it must be very gratifying as an attorney as well.
It's so gratifying.
Yeah. Let me take a quick pause and just say that we happen to be talking with a bona fide expert in the area of immigration law. And should you be watching right now and have any questions for Ina Winston, you can call us live at 312-738-1060. We're having a fascinating conversation right now, but that doesn't mean that Ina can't make time for you, because as anybody who knows her will tell you, Ina makes time for everybody. So Ina, I wanted to talk a little bit about quotas and about how the United States over the years has attempted to control what people come into the country, who's allowed to live here, and where do they come from. That's always been an area that the executive branch and the federal government generally has tried to control. How does the way we do it now compare to the way we used to do it?
Okay. Well, the way we do it now is remarkably improved. Oh my goodness, we only have a few more minutes.
Time flies.
Let's put it this way. Throughout our history, America has been ambivalent towards immigrants. We have had a strong nativist strain throughout our history. There have been periods in time in the early 1900s and the late 1800s when immigration was based on racial groups. It was restricted to a very small percentage, 2% of the people who were here at a certain period of time. That meant no Slavs, no Italians, no Jews. I mean, get the picture. There was, at an earlier time, we had just plain exclusion of Chinese people. They could not become citizens, and we had, and that law was the Chinese Exclusion Act was renewed for 10 years, even in 1902, which is relatively recent. So racism is not new to the United States. It's a consistent theme, but the present system is much more neutral in the sense that it allocates a certain percentage of the overall number of visas to each country. It's 7% per country. So it's neutral, but it's also harsh because you have certain countries that have so many people who are trying to leave that you have huge backlogs in the way these visas are granted.
So, for example, Mexico.
Mexico, if you have brother for a sister in Mexico, and this is all available to you if you want to look on the NVC Visa Priority Bulletin site. It's not a secret. Mexico, they're working on cases from June of 2000 for people who, and earlier, for people who want to bring a sibling over. Philippines, August 22nd, 2002. Even for U.S. citizens, if you have married son or daughter of a U.S. citizen, they're back in cases filed in 1997.
Wow.
For Mexico.
So, what I think we're saying is that the system may technically be the same and equal for everybody, but not every country has the same level of demand.
Well, that's right.
And
exactly.
not right. And so that's how you end up with these multiple decade backlogs. I think that's a particularly interesting point to conclude on, Ina, because it's one thing to look at the numbers in abstraction and say, this is the situation. It's quite another thing to look somebody in the eye when they are in a situation that is insecure, whether it's because of a situation in their home or a situation in their home country. And here we are, the United States of America, it's supposed to be a beacon of freedom for the world, and so many people end up having either the door slammed on them or an endless wait imposed, which then creates a lot of despair and is also not very efficient.
That's true, but there are some solutions that, while they wouldn't solve everything, they would solve a lot of problems. There are many undocumented people here. They are not going anywhere. We should move the registry date up. Mm-hmm. The registry date right now is 1972, a person who can show that they have been here no matter how they came, as long as they have no crimes. Can become documented, and I advocate for moving that registry date up so that it's like 2012, something reasonable to help people come right out of the shadows and get security.
I couldn't agree with you more. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Ina, I want to thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And please feel free to contact Greater Chicago Legal Clinic with any legal questions or concerns like this or any others you might have. 312-726-2938. I'm Adam Salzman. This has been Legal Aid Explained.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.